China has extended air and naval military exercises near Taiwan. This after a controversial visit by a U.S. congressional delegation led by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Here's what she had to say when addressing criticism of her trip to a place China considers a breakaway province.
Our friendship with Taiwan is a strong one. It is bipartisan in the House and the Senate. Overwhelming support for peace, the status quo in Taiwan.
And joining us is another member of that delegation that was on the trip, Illinois Congressman Krishnamoorthi. Congressman Krishnamoorthi, welcome back, and thank you for being here. There are reports now that China's expanded these alleged missile drops into the waters around the Taiwan Strait. Are you worried that the visit there might have provoked a broader conflict?
Well, you know, this type of provocative behavior unfortunately happened long before we went to Taiwan, and it's happening now. It's irresponsible and reckless. But if the cost of avoiding that type of provocative behavior is ceding control of Taiwan or ceding control of our travel schedule to the Chinese Communist Party, that's not a price we're going to pay.
And tell us your impressions of Taiwan when you were there and what was accomplished on this mission.
Well, I think there are two reasons we went. One is, especially in light of Ukraine, we want to make sure that what happened in Ukraine doesn't happen with Taiwan. And so that means we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with our friends and partners and allies in the region against any aggression by the People's Republic of China. And then the second reason we went was to expand our economic ties with Taiwan and other countries, especially in light of the passage of the CHIPS Act, which encourages more manufacturing of semiconductor chips in the United States. Taiwan was especially excited about this particular piece of legislation. And in fact, they've pledged to invest $20 billion in manufacturing facilities in America for those high-end semiconductor chips.
One of the criticisms we heard from some China experts that we had on the show was, why now, given the fact that there is some internal politics at play in China? They have the upcoming Chinese National Congress. So was the timing a problem?
I think the timing would always be a problem for the Chinese Communist Party. I think they would basically say we should never go to Taiwan. And in fact, they were trying to set a precedent, not only for us, but for any member of Congress, and for that matter, increasingly, they'll do that to unofficial visits, members of the business community, and so forth. And so, again, it's about control, Paris. They want to have complete control over what happens with Taiwan, and they want to strangle that democracy. And under the Taiwan Relations Act, we are legally obligated to support Taiwan in its self-defense.
And I'm sure, being a congressman from Illinois, and you're talking about those investments in the U.S., you're trying to get some of those investments here in Illinois. You mentioned our policy. We have, the U.S. has this one China policy, but then these unofficial diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Can you just explain that policy a little more for us?
Sure. Under the one China policy, and the Taiwan Relations Act, basically we are obligated to do two things. One is support the defense of Taiwan. Two, support our own forces in their capacity to resist the use of force by any party in that region. And, I guess there's a third, which is we also recognize the PRC as being the official, country of China. But all that being said, all the differences that remain are to be negotiated peacefully, Paris, not through military movements, not through provocation, which is exactly what the PRC is engaged in right now.
Do you think the U.S. should recognize Taiwan as its own sovereign nation, or just kind of continue with this one China policy and then having diplomatic relations with Taiwan?
I think we should maintain the status quo. We want to restore calm and stability to the Taiwan Strait. And that means that, we want Taiwan to be able to flourish in its democracy. By the way, I've learned a lot about Taiwan during that trip and since, which is it is considered one of the freest countries on earth, not only in terms of having a booming and flourishing economy, but also in terms of its respect for human rights and minorities within Taiwan. And we want that to continue. And so even at the same time that we maintain official ties to the PRC, and we should find ways to work with them, we should also maintain ties with the Taiwan government, and hopefully they can resolve their differences at the bargaining table.
Certainly China not known to have very strong records on some of those things you mentioned. I want to shift gears and move to the massive climate and inflation bill that just passed the Senate this weekend. It's about a $750 billion bill that, among other things, calls for a 15% minimum income tax on corporations and offers $430 billion in incentives toward clean energy. It also caps the price of insulin. Are you a yes vote when this comes over to the House?
Yes, I'm a yes vote. It also lowers the deficit and debt by $300 billion over 10 years. So it does a number of things. It lowers carbon emissions. It lowers prescription drug prices. It lowers premiums for insurance policies on the Obamacare exchanges. It lowers deficits and it lowers inflation over time. This is all really good stuff, Paris.
How does that inflation provision, how does it address inflation?
Well, the idea is that economists say that one of the ways that you can lower inflation is by reducing government debt and government spending over time. And so by doing this, you basically help to reduce demand a little bit, and you help to lower inflation.
And is this the kind of bill that's going to get near unanimous support among Democrats? Because given margins, you can't afford to lose too many Democrats on this, or could it be caught up with inter-party battles?
I have a good feeling about this. I think that we are going to get to a near unanimous vote on our side. Who knows? We may even get one or two votes on the other side. I don't know. But there's so much good stuff in here in this Inflation Reduction Act that it'll be interesting to see if every single member of the Republican caucus votes no, in which case that would also signal where they stand, for instance, on capping the price of insulin for seniors or trying to lower prescription drug prices and so forth.
And I'm sure a lot of stuff in here that Democrats are looking forward to running on for the November general election. Recent polling shows Democrats have a slight edge in terms of their approval rating for maintaining control of Congress, although will that be enough, I mean, given the way districts are drawn, to not lose the House to Republicans?
I don't know, Paris. I think that ultimately the most important poll will be Election Day. Until then, we'll be running like we're 10 points down, and we should because this is a challenging year, and we have to do everything we can to get people out to vote, and of course to convince people that it's better to have Democrats in charge of the House. I think that, and the Senate, and I think that this Inflation Reduction Act, along with passage of the CHIPS Act, along with passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the gun violence reduction bill, shows that we can get things done. We need to get things done, and it's better to do that than to end up relitigating 2020 or talking about how we can strip women of their reproductive freedom or get rid of gun control measures and so forth.
There certainly has been a flurry of legislative action of late in Washington. Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Paris.